first. And I think if you guys in the Pratikon, you would also encounter this gatha. Nisankya nikhankya nivittigit shamudaditya uva buhathari karane vachala pavavane attha. These are the 8 types of darshanachar, the 8 conducts that a Shravak must practice in relation to his Samyak Darshan. Now, you could argue that, I haven't attained Samyak Darshan, so what's the point of doing it? It's the same point of doing everything that we do, even though we haven't attained the required background or the qualification. Because these kriyas themselves are so powerful that they can, do the reverse. They can help you in acquiring Samyak Darshan, and they can help you in preserving, maintaining, and securing it, and ensuring that the Samyak Darshan keeps on becoming better and better. So the first 3 darshanachars is something you're kind of familiar with, because they're related to the 5 atichars that we saw earlier, and then you have the remaining 5 darshanachars. So we'll look at them briefly first, and then we'll move on to discussing them elaborately. The first one is Nisankya. That is Nihishankata, the absence of Shanka, which we saw. Shanka was an atichar in Samyak Darshan. So having an absolute absence of any doubt in Jin Vachan is Shanka. Is any kind of doubt is Shanka, basically. So this Shanka could be present in a person if tries to it could be present in the form of curiosity, but not something which is in the sense of a doubt. So both of them are totally different, but having a doubt in this Jin Vachan is not something obviously good. So the absence of these doubts is called Nishankta. The second was called Nishkankshita, which is the absence of Kanksha. We saw that Kanksha refers to, the desiring any other religion apart from the mark that is propagated by the Tirthankars, desiring, wishing to be a Hindu or a Muslim or whatever, just because you like a certain quality about that religion, the discipline that they have or the cleanliness that they have or so on. The third one is Nirvichikitsa. Nirvichikitsa is the absence of Chikitsa. We saw that Vichikitsa. So we saw that Vichikitsa is of 2 types. The first refers to doubting the fruit of the dharma kriyas that we do. That is the first definition. The second definition is being disgusted or feeling a sense of disgust or dislike towards our sadhu bhagwan, sadhuji bhagwans, because of how unclean they are, because they don't bathe, because they don't confirm, they don't adhere to our hygienic standards. So the absence of Vichikitsa is Nirvichikitsa. These 3 are the first darshanachars. So I'm not elaborating much on these, even like in the basic introduction, because you're familiar with the atichars that these 3, the meaning of these 3 atichars. So the fourth achar of Samyak Darshan is Amood Drashti. So briefly speaking, mood is foolish. A person who is called a mood is basically murk, a fool. And a mood is someone who has, a far sight, who has a very deep vision. So a Samyak Darshan is always a visionary personality, be it any, a spiritual field or the sansaric field. He is smart, and he has he has a sense of wisdom and a sense of profound insight into whatever he does. So whatever situations might crop up, he does not act. He always has this. He always looks at the bigger picture. So we'll obviously discuss what situations and all later on. But the point is, no matter what happens, no matter how terrible scenes he might see, he will not shake from his faith. Some people. So for example, some people might see sadhus who are using microphones, using mobile phones, electricity, whatever, all of these things that are not permitted. Someone might end up seeing a sadhu, being intimate with a woman, for all you know. So at such a time, a person who is not Amood Drishti will be like, this is so awful, our Jain sadhu is really like that, and he'll slowly, he'll slowly start doubting everyone, he'll lose his faith, and he'll lose his Samyak Darshan too. But an Amood Drishti person will think into the larger picture and see, and he'll recollect the scriptures and he'll think that this is wrong, However, there are still sadhus present today, true sadhus. So I'm going to try my best to, avoid these, and I still firmly believe that true sadhus still exist, and so on. The fifth archer is called Upabruhana. Upabruhana basically refers to praising anyone who is present in the Sangh. So when you ignore or neglect a person who has virtues, you're basically neglecting your darshanachar. You are abandoning your duty, your conduct. Because a person who worships Samyak Darshan, he will make sure that he, respects and worships the person who has good qualities in that person. So obviously we're talking of people from the Sangh here. So sadhu, sadhvi, shravaks and shravakas. Fellow Samarashti people, that is. So, which is why whenever a person accomplishes something, when a person is about to take diksha, or they're about to they've done some huge tapasya, or anything trivial also for that matter, he will ensure that he uses every opportunity to praise them. Because when you praise and when you appreciate the virtues of that person, you are not only inviting those virtues to come live in your heart, but you're also increasing the morale. You're encouraging the person, that the person in front of you, to do better and better in his life. So even the tiniest thing that they do, we should make it a point to praise them, to take note of how well they're doing. It could be something very trivial. For example, a person in the temple, he's reciting a stavan, and it's just so beautiful, and you can see their expressions in there. You should do upabrohan of that. You should praise that, and you should tell them how you're so impressed by that. It could be, when you're doing Pratikraman and a person is reciting the sutras so clearly with the accurate pause and punctuation wherever necessary, upabrohan of that. And it could be something as big as a person who has done Masak Shaman or Ubdhan or Navanu or whatever, any kind of Anushthan, be it big or small, any kind of virtue that they have, big or small. We should miss out on no chance, to ensure that we appreciate them publicly or privately, depending on the appropriate context. So usually, obviously, it's better to do it publicly, so even other people get to know these qualities, and they're inspired by that. The sixth author is Sthirikaran. Sthirikaran, so as the name suggests, Sthirikaran is basically stabilizing. When a person, could be a fellow Shravak, Shravaka, mainly refers to them, but also talks about sadhus and sadhvis. I'll give you an example of the latter later. So, when anyone from the Sangh is deviating from the true path, they are steering away from the words of Tirthankar Paramatma, from the conduct that is endorsed by Tirthankar Paramatma, then a Samarashti Shravak must do his best to, help that person steer clear again and come back to the right path, to stabilize them in the right path, basically, to ensure that, they are not misled into something else. So for example, it could be something like, a Shravak, any Jain, basically, coming under the false influence of a Kuguru, of a so-called Jain Guru, but a false Guru. It could be someone who is slowly, or who already has, bad act conducts in his life. It could be a person eating at night, eating kadmul, eating abhaksha food. It could be a person who is not doing puja, or who is not doing pratikmana samaik, who is not coming to the upasha because he's scared of monks. Anyone basically who's not on the right path, or who's about to fall off the right path, then stabilizing them in the way of religion is called Sthirikaran. So for Shrauks and Shravakas, obviously you can understand this, but even for sadhus and sadhvis, we are responsible for their well-being and ensuring that they stick to the right path. Which is why, if I'm not mistaken, in the agam called Thanang Sutra, it is mostly in the Thanang Sutra only. There are, and this we also discussed this briefly while discussing the first part of Shraddhavati. We saw that there are 4 kinds of Shravaks, and the first analogy that was given to them is Amma Piya, which is the mother and father of sadhus. So Shravaks also have an ethical responsibility to ensure that, you know, sadhus and sadhis are on the right path. They aren't giving into vices, and that they're doing better and better every day, not falling from their conduct. A lot of us, we just dismiss it as you know, they're still superior to us. Why should we bother? You know, better. All of this is absolute bullshit. So one example that we discussed earlier uh, is the example of Priyadarshana, who is the wife of Jamali, the daughter of Mawar Sami, but she gets off the she goes on the wrong path along with her husband, who invents that new path. And we saw how one of Bhagwan's Shravaks, this particular potter, he almost sets fire to her clothes, and she realizes the truth. And I think I've mentioned this. I remember mentioning this, but I hope you remember it. So that similarly, I don't know if you guys have heard of Ratnakar Sariji Maharaj story. So in the 14th century, there was a Mahatma, an Acharya Bhagwant called Sri Ratnakar Sariji Maharaj. He was very well versed in the scriptures, very Gitarth, and from the looks of it, very Sayami too, very excellent in his conduct. Now one day, a Shravak has come to visit Ratnakar Sariji. So he's come from another city altogether, this particular Shravak, and as per his routine, when he comes to the new city, he goes to the Dirasar, he does puja, his whatever daily thing, and he sees that he comes to know there's an Acharya Bhagwant in the Upashray right next to the Dirasar, so he goes there, and at that point, the Upashray, there's a the Acharya Bhagwant is giving Deshna in the Upashray at that point. Okay, so he takes his samik and he sits to listen to the Deshna of the Acharya Bhagwant, Ratnakar Sariji. I forgot the name of the Shravak, but that's kind of irrelevant right now. So at that point, the Acharya Bhagwant was giving Vyakhyan on the scripture called Updesh Mala. Updesh Mala is a scripture that has been written down by one of Mawar Sami's own Shishyas, not a Gandhar, but his own Shishya called Dharmadas Gani. He took Diksha from the hands of Mawar Sami and he's written Updesh Mala. So at that point, the Shravak, he's sitting for the Vyakhan and the Acharya Bhagwant is giving his Deshna and Updesh Mala. So in Updesh Mala, he comes across this particular verse, okay? So the verse says, Dosa Saya Mula Jalam Puvvarisi Vivajyam Jaivantam Atham Vahasi Anatham Kisa Anatham Tavam Charasi. So it talks about earth. Earth is money, wealth, any kind of wealth. He says that in the verse, Mawar Sami Bhavani says that this earth, this wealth is such that it is the root of several evil. Even in English, we say money is the root of all evil, right? So he says the same thing. And he says, Purvarisi Vivajyam Jaivantam. Purva Rishis, Purva Acharyas, sadhus in the past have all abandoned this wealth. Why are you, why are you, O great soul, clinging on to this wealth? And by clinging on to this wealth, how is it going to benefit your Sayam, your Sadhana, your Charitra? So this is the shlok that he's talking about. And he explains the meaning in the Vyakhyan, and the Vyakhyan is going on. So when the Vyakhyan gets over, so before the Vyakhyan gets over, the Acharya Bhagwant is doing Padalehan. Padalehan is basically a kriya wherein you introspect each and every belonging that you have to check if there's no insects or any kind of jeev in it, including your clothes, your books, your mattress, everything for a sadhu. Your handkerchief, the tiniest thing that the sadhu owns. Okay, so while doing that, Acharya Bhagwant, they keep a Sthapna Charya, which is a bag wherein I discussed they have shells in it and they're all consecrated. So in that Sthapna Charya, when he's doing Padalehan, the Shravak is carefully seeing from a distance and he sees that the Acharya Bhagwant is not letting anyone else do the Padalehan. He's doing it all alone. So he kinds of, he tries to see what's happening. And in that, when he opens it to do Padalehan, he's seeing from a distance, but the Acharya Bhagwant doesn't know that he's seen it. in that thing, in the Stavacharya, the Acharya has kept diamonds, rubies, emerald, sapphire, pearls, all of these different precious stones. So he, while doing Padani, he counts, okay, I have so many diamonds, I have so many jewels, I have so many rubies, so many pearls. Okay, everything is perfect. And he wraps it up again and he puts it. Okay. And then the Vyakhyan continues. So at the end of the Vyakhyan, the Shravak, he's sitting there. No, Shravaks in the past also, they didn't agree to everything. They didn't simply, just say yes, yes, yes to everything that Sadhu said. They themselves are very thoughtful, and they also knew the basics of the scriptures, or not in fact the basics, they were very well versed in the scriptures themselves. So whenever there was an occasion, they would sit very erect, and they would not give in simply. They would be like, okay, go on. They wouldn't just agree. But as soon as they understood and they realized that this is correct, this is true, and this is, agreeing with what the scriptures say, then they would join their hands and say, yes, this is right, I agree. Okay. So similarly, when this Vyakhyan was going on, this Shravak, he doesn't understand the meaning, he says. So he's just standing still and he's like, okay, his face clearly says that he's not understood it. So he says, so the Acharya says, what happened? And he says, I still haven't understood the meaning of it. So he's like, okay, fine, come tomorrow. And the next day, the Acharya Bhagwan, he explains the same thing. Now the Acharya Bhagwan was very, very scholarly, like I said earlier. So he uses different forms of logic, different examples, different, points of view to make him understand the meaning of this shlok, which is otherwise, if you see, very simple. So 2, 3, 4 days, he still doesn't understand it. Now, around the night of the 4th or the 5th day, it's, roughly around midnight, 12 or 1. And perhaps a cat entered the Upashraya, and there was some commotion inside, okay, because of the movement and everything. And the Acharya Bhagwan, he wakes up immediately and he checks his Stabdachara and he carefully sees no one, I hope, a thief hasn't entered the Upashraya and hasn't stolen my jewels. So he checks everything and he counts everything again, and then he sees everything is intact, so he sleeps carefully. But when he goes back to sleep, he cannot sleep. Simply, he's just like sleepless at this point. And he realizes the words of that Shravak, who he constantly kept on saying, I still haven't understood the meaning of this. So now the next day, as per the routine for the last few days, the Shravak comes again and they start discussing the same thing. They're about to start discussing the same thing, but before that, the Acharya Bhagwan, he calls for a mortar and a pestle, okay, and a very sharp pestle, and he empties all those jewels, all those pearls in that mortar, and he grinds everything to a very fine course of powder, and he disposes it off right in front of the Shravak. And then he starts explaining the meaning of the shlok, and the Shravak says, yes, now I have understood the meaning of this shlok that you were trying to explain. And the Acharya Bhagwan says, he's so happy. The Acharya Bhagwan says, so the Shravak has, the Shravak is very happy himself because he was successful in trying to bring the Acharya Bhagwan on the right path. And he's happy that he could improve this great Acharya Bhagwan. He could save the Acharya Bhagwan from going into a bad place in the hereafter. And the Acharya Bhagwan is also very grateful that he found a Shravak like this to correct him and to bring him on the right path. Okay, so because of that, which is why the Shravak says that I understood the meaning, because you can actually only, truly speaking, explain the meaning when you're living it, and that is what he wanted to prove to that Acharya Bhagwan. That and the Acharya Bhagwan admits it later. He says that this shlok was not only meant for Shravaks like you, but it was something that I should have taught my own self first. I should have explained the meaning of the shlok to myself first and then to you. So in that manner, both of them they get on the right path. And later on, when this Ratnakar Sariji Maharaj, he's going atop Shatrunjay, he on the top of Shatrunjay, when he visits Adinath Paramatma, he realizes the previous things that all of the parigra that he had kept for all of these years, and he starts repenting, and he composes 25 verses in Sanskrit, which are known as Ratnakar Panchavanshika in Sanskrit, and later on in the last century they were translated into Gujarati and also Hindi, and they're commonly known as Ratnakar Pachisi, a very famous creation. I'm sure all of us have heard of it. So this is how a Shravak, a Samyagrashi Shravak, did this Thirikaran of also not only an ordinary sadhu but also of an Acharya Bhagwant. The seventh Darshanachar is Vatsalya. Vatsalya is affection, is love, and like we just saw, having affection towards fellow sadharmics is Vatsalya. And the final and eighth Darshanachar is Prabhavna. Prabhavna doesn't refer to what we talk about in Gujarati, giving 10 rupees or 20 rupees or something at the end of a Vyakhyan or something to Shravaks. That is just a way, but Prabhavna essentially means propagating the dharma to different people in the world. And we'll obviously look at elaborate forms of all of these. But before we move on to that, please add in if you have any questions. All right, okay. So the first Darshanachar, like we saw, was Nishankit, which is the lack of Shanka. I won't elaborate much about it. But basically, the lack of Shanka, the lack of doubt is essential. In the world, we have this saying, Munde Munde Matir Bhinna. Every head thinks differently. Everyone has their own opinions. Everyone has their own thoughts. And someone might try to justify it. Okay, we have Anekantvad, we have this, we have that. So there's bound to be difference of opinion and so on and so forth. But such differences of opinion, they do not arise with respect to principles. Which is when the Shastra, when it comes to determining principles and, talk about principles, differences in these matters are not allowed. So saying that, I could disagree with this and I could still be Jain doesn't work, because the whole Munde Munde Matir Bhinna adage won't work in Jainism, because the creator or the establisher of this Shasan were Sarvagya Paramatmas who have no shred for any kind of, ignorance or doubt or any reason to speak dishonestly, like we saw earlier. So, Tameva Sacham Nisankam Jam Janem Paveyam. Only that is true, and without doubt, that which Jineshwar Paramatma has, propagated. So that is Nishankit. I'm not elaborating much on the first three achars. The second one is Nishkankshit, having no desire for other religions. And similarly, in that we also saw that Lokotar Mithyat was also included in the Kangshat achar, which means wishing for materialistic fruits as a result of our dharma is also included in the Kangshat achar. And a Samyagrashti Shravak or Sadhu is free from these achars. So, no matter anything sansaric comes to him, he might indulge in that activity because of his karma, because of his attachment. But when someone were to ask him, or if someone were to ask him, is this good or bad, he will always say that this is bad. Could be, going to the movies or watching a play or playing some sport, this and that. He could have a lot of addictions, he could have a lot of interests like those, but he will never try to justify them. Okay. The third one is Nirvichikitsa, that also I've seen earlier, being not having any of the two types of Vichikitsa is Nirvichikitsa. Now the fourth one is Amud Drashti. So everything that the Shravak learns or the Shravak hears, okay, anything new that he learns from his Guru Bhagwan, from his Kalyan Mitras, from reading the scriptures by himself, he will reflect upon it with a very profound vision. He won't simply take the superficial meaning and get lost with that. He will understand everything in a very coherent way. He will ensure that he understands it in a way that doesn't, he reflects on the interpretation in such a way that his reflection does not contradict the meaning of other scriptures. Because you're supposed to interpret the scriptures in such a way that the meanings of all scriptures do not clash with each other. And of any person who has attained this Shasan is surely Amud Drashti. I mean, he necessarily has to be Amud Drashti, because there are very minute concepts every now and everywhere in this shasan. So without having the far insight, the far-reaching vision, it's impossible for a person to actually to actually have true faith in the tenets of this shasan. So like we saw, mood is murk, is foolish, and a mood is someone who's not foolish, someone who's very wise and someone who thinks about stuff very wisely. Such as, so let me give an example. In the Agams, if we come across this proverb, which says, Padhamam Nanam Tao Daya. Gnyan comes first and Daya. And by extension, the Daya refers to any kind of activity, okay? So not just Daya or Ahimsa in general, but all kinds of dharmic activities that we do. And then Daya, then the Kriya. So first knowledge and then the Kriya. So the meaning of this is, if you want to practice Daya or if you want to practice any dharmic activity, then first understand it, know about it, get the required knowledge for this. But this doesn't mean that till you attain complete knowledge of that topic, of that activity, of that subject, you stop doing that altogether. So there are people today who use this verse and they use it to justify saying that first you attain all the necessary knowledge, only then you should do all of this. Otherwise, it's meaningless to do all of these kriyas, which is not true. Even though without knowledge you will do a vidhi, you will transgress the do's and don'ts set for that particular activity, it is still very, very important for us to make sure that we need to pursue the knowledge of it, and that is super important too. But till we get complete knowledge, it doesn't mean that we stop doing it altogether. You get better and better as in when you read. So this applies to any kind of activity that we do in this shasan. So this meaning can be understood only when a person is amud drashti, when he has a very deep thinking and he realizes that I cannot, obviously this meaning doesn't make sense. So even today, like there are sadhus, for example, they say crap like you've seen the sadhus that we have the sadhus that we have today in the present day, all of them they don't have any kind of tyag, tapasya, sayam as compared to the leaders that sacrificed their lives for this shasan, for this nation. So they're comparing the sacrifices made by the nationalistic movement leaders. They're comparing that with those of the sadhu bhagwans, and both of them have totally different intentions. Both of them are totally different from each other. But when you lack this amur drashti, you are bound to say a lot of stupid things. You're bound to say things that will actually or believe in things rather that will actually confuse you a lot, and it could end up kicking you out from the shasan, because it'll confuse you so much that you'll end up giving up everything altogether. Which is why there's this firm belief in the Amur Drashti Shravak that for my spiritual welfare, if there is one thing that I need, it is the aradhana of Paramatma's Agnya, Jin Agnya. Not just blindly doing everything, but trying to figure out what is the Agnya behind each of these aspects that I'm trying to pursue. And he sees that wherever there is a lack of Jin Agnya, there's no spiritual welfare for me. That is Amud Drashti. The fifth one is Upabruhana. So any person who is virtuous in this shasan, who himself is the worshipper of virtues, someone who is preaching the right path, who is conveying the right path of Paramatma, worshipping that person, praising that person, respecting that person, glorifying that person, all of this is Upabruhana. By praising the virtuous people, we also become virtuous, and even those who listen to the praise of these people, they become virtuous. For example, for the latter part, it's very clear, if you've been to a Gunanuvad Vyakyan wherein a Sadhu Bhagwant or a Sadhiji Bhagwant has attained Kal Dharma recently, there's a congregation and everyone's talking about, how virtuous he or she was and so on and so forth. So by talking about that, not only the speaker benefiting himself by bringing to memory the virtues of that person, but also the audience they're also benefiting from listening to the virtues of these. So, and when we talk about this, remember again in the five atichars, the fourth atichar was prashans of mithya drashtis. So both of these need to be you need to be very clear about both of these things. You should praise everyone who is in the shasan and who is virtuous without any hesitation whatsoever. So we're glorifying virtues, not an illusion of virtues. So a virtue that is going to benefit that person in the future is something that we're supposed to, glorify or exalt. Because there are people, so like I said, a thief could be very clever, but his cleverness is not a virtue that is going to benefit him. It is a virtue that is going to, result in his own downfall, his degradation spiritually, ethically, whatever. So similarly, even though Mithya Rashis could have a lot of virtues, we can do anumodana of them, but praising them publicly is not allowed. That is why in the, in one of the sajjas, Upadhyay Ashwari Masabi, he says it in Gujarati, he says, Mithyamati guna varnano, tado chotho dosh, unmargi thunata huve, unmargano posh. He says that avoid the fourth atichar of praising Mithya Rashtis, because when you praise Mithya Rashtis, you are basically nourishing their mithyatva. And you're pushing other people to, you're encouraging other people to be curious and explore that mithyatva. The sixth darshana is Sthirikaran, which we saw, I think, okay. So with that, another example that appears to me is in case of Shalibhadra. I think we know about Shalibhadra's previous life and how he's grown up with so much comfort. Now finally, when Bhadra Mata, Shalibhadra's mother, he tells Shrenik Maharaja that my Shalibhadra is taking Diksha. Shrenik Maharaja is so thrilled, because if you remember from the last sessions, we saw that Shalibhadra was so frail, he was nourished with so much luxury that one day, even when Shrenik was holding him in his lap as a kid, Shalibhadra started to sweat. He was not accustomed to being so close to anyone like that. He would literally sweat. He was raised with that kind of luxury. And when he hears that Shalibhadra is going to take Diksha, he's just so, happy, so thrilled. He's like, it's so fortunate that he's taking Diksha. And he actually verifies it. Are you talking of the same person who started sweating when he was in my lap? And Bhadra Mata is like, yeah, I'm talking about the same guy, my son. And Shrenik immediately says, you are not going to do the Diksha Mahotsav of your son. Give me the opportunity to, do the entire Diksha Mahotsav. And I will ensure that, all the arrangements are made by me. Let me take this opportunity. And he immediately goes to Shalibhadra and he bows down to him. And at that point, when he goes, Shalibhadra had 32 wives. And his wives were bathing him, okay, with fragrant water and milk and sandalwood and this and that. And at that point, Shalibhadra, the emperor of Magad, which is one of the largest states of India at that point, he immediately, the words that he utters on saying Shalibhadra, he says, Dhanyosi, Kruta Punyosi. Oh Shalibhadra, you are blessed and you are Kruta Punya. Kruta Punya is basically someone who has done a lot of good deeds, because you have, finally undertaken this decision to carry on the burdens of the 5 Mahavrats on you. And the way that he's talking, see, at that point, Shrenik, as a sadhanik, he could have gone and said, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? How will you endure so much discomfort when you couldn't even stand being so close to me and this and that? But instead of doing that, Shrenik Maharaja is opting to do Sthirikaran. He's trying to stabilize Shalibhadra and encourage him to do better and better. And he's making Shalibhadra more excited to do that. So not only Sthirikaran, you also see Upabruhana here. You also see how he's praising his virtues. And later on, when the entire Diksha procession is happening on the highways, Shrenik Maharaja is acting like a servant of Shalibhadra, and he's usually kings are the ones for which, their attendants, they hold a parasol, the umbrella for them. But in case of in case of Shalabhadra's Diksha procession, Shrenik Maharaja himself, he's holding the chhatra in his hand and he's, holding atop Shalabhadra's head as a mark of his deference to the Diksha Ki Shalabhadra, which speaks volumes and volumes about how he was so Shrenik Maharaja, despite not having that much, despite having avirati, he was so respectful towards people, towards his fellow sadharmics, and especially those who were about to take Diksha. So, which is why, similarly, Shalabhadra's brother-in-law, Dhanna Angar, whom also we kind of looked at in one of the previous sessions in conjunction with Shalabhadra's story, his brother-in-law, when he's about to take Diksha, when he wants to take Diksha, he goes to seek permission, okay? So his mother, so in one of the sajjas in Gujarati, this entire conversation is kind of roughly translated. So he says, Anumati vats koi na deshe, pardoshi sayam leshe. So he says, son, listen, you've come here to seek my permission, but understand one thing, no one is going to give permission here at home because we are all trapped in so much rag that we simply can't let you go. So it's a good thing that you came to seek my permission, but we are trapped in rag, we're trapped in moh. So getting permission from me is very difficult. So she's saying that, but she's saying still, you go on your path. So this is also how much Thirikaran. She's admitting that, see, I am trapped in rag, but I'm going to try my best to ensure that I don't prove as an obstacle in your path. So in that way, she's also doing Thirikaran of Dhanna Angar. And we all know that Dhanna Angar, he becomes one of the finest sadhus that Mahaswami Bhavan ever had. The seventh one is Sadharmic Vatsalya, Sadharmic Bhakti, what we also call Swami Vatsalya. So now in Gujarati, when we say Swami Vatsalya, the first thing that comes in our mind is food. There's some program, so there's food kept for all Jains, and we're supposed to go to the Upasha wherever and partake of the food because someone wants to take the lob to feed everyone. But this is a very limited and a very narrow way of looking at this. Like we said, Vatsalya Bhav, affection. The affection that a person has towards his sadhamics is way more than anyone else, towards anyone else in this world. So Sadharmic Vatsalya does not extend only to food, and that, in fact, that is one of the most negligent ways. It is. I'm not against it, and in fact, this is something everyone should do at least once a year. But it's not the only way. I'm thinking that, okay, I fed them and I did Sadharmic Bhakti. That is absolutely wrong, because Sadharmic Bhakti refers to taking care of our sadhamics in all ways. Like we said, Dravya and Bhav Daya. Here we can't use the words Daya because Daya is done towards someone who is pitiful, towards someone whom you feel pity for, Sadharmics are not Daya Patra. They are Bhakti Patra. They are someone we should have devotion towards, respect towards. Even though they are our brothers in religion, we worship them because they have virtues. So feeding them is one thing, but taking care that they don't lack anything in their day-to-day sustenance, ensuring that they have food provision, clothing, they have money to run their day-to-day expenses, such as in case of Corona, like I said, so many families all across India, Jain families, they are suffering. Now, when it is our duty as Jains, not only to do Anukampa Dan and, take care of all humans, regardless of their religion, in these times, but it is a primary responsibility to take care of our sadharmics who are literally dying. There are so many families all across India who have died because of, not having enough means to sustain themselves with the lockdown and everything else. So at such a point, it becomes our prerogative, it becomes our prime responsibility to ensure that we're doing our best to, help them in whatever way we can, giving them money, food, clothing, whatever we can offer to do their bhakti and not merely donate it, like any other donation. We're not donating out of pity, but out of respect. Sadharmics, when our sadharmics are dying, it is awfully important. It's just unnatural that we spend our lives, we move on as if nothing has happened. We should have tears in our eyes thinking that my fellow brothers have died because of these things. So in such ways also we should take care. And the lack of Sadharmik Vatsalya is one of the core ways, the core reasons that Jainism is suffering right now. The Sangh is suffering right now. Most people, they're interested in, building temples, building upashanas, and this and that. All of this is nice and good, but you should also take care to ensure that your sadhamiks are taken care of. So sadhamik bhakti is something that is very, very important. It could manifest in different ways. Even if one capable Jain family tries to ensure that I'll take care of another Jain family who's not doing so well, then we could improve our entire situation as a community very, very, very well. But even apart from that, there's always ways to help them out. Sadhamik Bhakti is one of the 11 kartavyas that one should do at least once in a year. So here it refers to inviting them for a meal, offering them food, clothing, etc. Good clothing and all of that. But even for people who cannot do that, they could try their best. They can give a box of sweets, or they could give a sweet each. They could give something like that, a laddu, whatever, to their fellow Sadhamik brothers as a mark of respect, at least once in a year. So all of these things are some things that are concerned with Sadhamik Vatsalya. But otherwise also, on a day-to-day basis, when you see your fellow sadhamik, your heart should be overwhelming with that love, that affection. And as opposed to that, a person who displays compassion, who displays pity or mercy towards a sadharmik, is attacking effectively his own samyak darshan. Because as I said, a sadharmik is not Daya Patra, he's Bhakti Patra. And it could be someone, it could be male or female. It could be someone older than you or younger than you. Doesn't matter. As long as he's a Jain and he abides and he believes by the principles, all the principles that Paramatma said, he's a sadharmik. So both of these things we need to understand. There's two aspects to it. One is when you do anukampa in place of bhakti, that is wrong. And when you do when you do bhakti in place of anukampa, that is also wrong. So this I made it clear. Now, when I mean bhakti in place of anukampa, I'm basically talking about. A couple of examples are coming to my mind. A prominent one is, gaushalas. We have a trend in the Jain community. We often go to feed cattle, to feed cows, buffaloes, etc. Now, this is anukampa dan, and this is also part of our part of the activities that we're supposed to do. Although anukampa is at the lowest base of the entire hierarchy, but it is still something that we need to do. But while doing anukampa dan, or by feeding that cow or that buffalo, if you have a feeling of devotion towards them, thinking, okay, this is Gai Mata and she'll bless me, she'll do this, she'll do that, and you're effectively doing bhakti, then that's completely wrong. And on the other hand, like we saw, sadharmiks are supposed to be venerated and worshipped. In place of that, if you feed them thinking, oh, he's a poor guy, give him something, you give them food, clothing, whatever, then that is also absolutely wrong. And even thinking that way for a fellow Jain clearly reflects on how good we are as Jains. And the eighth one is prabhavna. So there are 8 types of prabhavaks that are mentioned in the scripture,